it's a new provisioner, a parallel to ironic provisioner, and some way to choose provisioner. The RAM-disk implementation itself is probably a native, like a clear CoreOS image that downloads the IPA container as a second stage after it configures networking. That's at least how I see it, and that sounds reasonable. But yeah, everything else is completely normal flow. We start with inspection. Inspection is done by running Python agent, cleaning, then deployment is done to a small part by running Python agent. So we're still using root device hits, for example, or software rate if we need it. And then it runs CoreOS installer. Then the final reboot is also done by Ironic. I've checked CoreOS installer allows disabling its own reboot. And then, yeah, then it's CoreOS. Then everything is fine. So what does everyone think?
Sounds like the next step will be for us to work up a Metal3 docs proposal with a bit more detail. I did see some discussion on Slack where it sounded like a few people were using Fedora CoreOS and trying out the new Live ISO feature. So I don't think, I need to go and look up the username, but I don't think we've got that person on the call, but perhaps we can follow up on Slack and try and get a bit more information about, you know, that use case and see whether this work would be helpful.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, I hope you can hear me right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry for.
Wonderful.
Sorry for my issues that I missed the point. But what I understood is that the next step would be maybe just to go with the proposal. So if there are no questions on this item, maybe we could move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one is from Nam, asking for the review on the PRs, I think. Nam?
Yeah, thanks, Perus. Yes, there's true PRs on the ironic image and ironic inspector image repos. The role of the PR is something like this. Like if we edit the secrets that contain the certificate and the key for of ironic and ironic inspector. So we need a mechanism to make the ironic and ironic inspector can reload or restart, so it can use the new certificate and new key. So these true PRs serve that purpose. The way we did it is like we put a for loop inside the container, and the for loop will, the loop will like check the file, the event of the certificate, the file event of the certificate, and if it detects any like update from the file, so it will try to restart the container. That's the way. So please take a look, or let me know your idea of this approach.
I think I mentioned it on the comments, but it feels to me that it's not simply the right approach to managing containers. I think whatever external party is managing the ironic pod for you should be responsible for restarting the pod if configuration changes. I'm not a big container expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like restarting services from inside the containers is the right way to do that. Could someone agree or disagree?
We were thinking there might be some options to detect that there was a change and then try to restart the pod from the outside. But to be honest, we don't have, like, for now at least, any alternative that we could foresee and try to implement. I think that was the reason that Nam tried to do it from within the the container.
Yeah, I think that I agree that it should be like an optimal way if we can have like a component which is outside of the container and keep watching and restart the container whenever the certificate is updated. But it seems like we may need to implement like a controller for that, just for taking care of the iron part. So I think it's a bit too complicated for this thing. So maybe this approach. I mean, it's kind of simple and straightforward. So yeah. So, but definitely, if like if we can observe any like problem with this approach in the future, so maybe just we need to take care of the idea that to have like an open a component outside the container to restart the container.
Any other questions or comments on this approach, or on the question that Dimitri mentioned? Okay, Dimitri, do you have like any kind of alternative suggestions to what would be the best to do it from the outside, like, or the way to do it, like, because like it could be done in a way like not mentioned with the controller, for example, but the thing is that it's very minor thing that I don't think that the controller just only for this purpose would be the optimal. One way I was thinking, which is like very rough thought, is that there could be master and agent kind of the process. The agent would listen within the container, and if there is a change, it would just send kind of the signal to the outside, and then the master that is running outside somehow would restart the pod. But yeah, not sure if that's also the correct way to do it or not.
It'd be interesting to understand more, how people are tending to deploy the bare metal operator and the ironic dependencies. I mean, obviously one option is just to have some static YAML configuration, which is what most of us have been using for development. In the OpenShift integration, we have got an operator that starts the things and has a view of the cert files. I'm wondering if we need something similar in the upstream Metal3 case, not just for this case, but for all kinds of configurations. I think the only risk there is it ends up being quite opinionated, and I get the impression that people are sometimes deploying in different ways, and it would be hard to support all of them. But it's something we could look at perhaps, is whether there's an opportunity for an operator that manages these services and have some patterns which people can collaborate on and potentially adopt.
Yeah, I think that could be nice if like we can have a mechanism for like, I mean, in general for this kind, this kind of case, not this specific case, but maybe, I mean, for any kind of cases that which is have the same, like in the same situation like this. But I wonder, I mean, like for that approach, I mean, yeah, please go ahead, Dimitri, please go ahead. You were trying to say something, right?
No, that was me. I was just going to say, the direction I suggested was more of a kind of a long-term thing. The problem with it is it's not a quick fix. It would be a new component, and we need to spend a while collecting some requirements and building it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So is that okay if for this specific case, we can move forward with this approach?
I'm not going to block it, but I also prefer somebody who understands Kubernetes better and implications on various parts better to approve that. So maybe Steve or Zane or Stephen.
I think if we go ahead with this approach, we should perhaps put a variable in so users of these containers can choose whether they want that behavior or not. Other than that, I'm not blocking this if it's going to be helpful to those in the community. Probably isn't the default behavior we want, but having some way to turn it on, I can see could be useful.
Okay. Could you say a little bit more about the variable that you mentioned? Is that like an option to whether to use or not use, or what?
Yeah, so like here we've got like if ironic TLS set up. I mean, whenever you turn TLS on, do we want this behavior where it watches the cert file and restarts, or would it be reasonable to add another variable? Oh, I see. So this new variable is actually just controlling this behavior. I misunderstood.
No, actually there's no new variables, just like the ironic TLS setup is the existing one that is
okay, so that was my concern is like not all users of ironic TLS setup will want this behavior, or they might not. So if we think that's true, then maybe we add another new variable, which is just specific to this new behavior.
I see. Okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, maybe now you could try to add the variable as Steve suggested, and just push the PR, and then like if we're saying it's okay for now to rely on this, maybe we could use this. We also need this internally as well. So maybe like I agree that like if we think about the long term, that it would make sense to have some kind of the operator managing this. But maybe for now, at least, we could just rely on this kind of workaround.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the discussion.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this approach or the PRs? Right, if not, then let's move on. So the next is, for me, it's actually on behalf of Kashif. He was not able to make it today. So there was a proposal update for the data template to make some fields mutable, because previously they were immutable. So I think we went through, like Kashif went through like a couple of there were a couple of reviews on the update of the proposal, and I think he has now LGTM, but he wanted to make sure if there are no any other like objections or comments that someone would still want to put. So if you have time, please go ahead and review. And I would also ask if it's okay that we agree maybe on lazy consensus for a week maybe, because I think the proposal, sorry, the PR that is implementing is also in place, and I think it's more or less ready. It's just waiting. It's on hold because it's waiting for the proposal to get merged, or the update of the proposal to get merged. So yeah, if you have time, please take a look, and I would just ask if it's okay that we put the lazy consensus on the proposal so that we move on with the implementation. So any questions or comments on this? Okay, if not, then move on, and I will just put the comment later on the proposal PR. So the next is from Steve. I think it's PR on the BMO.
I think you jumped one.
Yeah, I think Yuri.
Oh,
yeah.
my bad.
No worries.
That's my bad. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So basically, for a bit of context, not everyone here probably know, I've been working on adding some virtual media validation for the BMO. Basically, you should be able, when trying to use virtual media with Redfish and with iDrag or for Redfish virtual media, you should be able to identify if the hardware will be able to perform virtual media or not, at least with some based on the Redfish specification, I would say. So this pull request try to address this, and I got a lot of feedback already since I've started this pull request. And basically, the last one is from Dimitri, just to figure out if we should consider when we can't access the BMC to identify if the, like for example, there's a timeout issue or any different error different from unauthorized, if we should just log a warning or consider that it would be a real error when using the BMO. Basically, in the OpenShift side where we are going to use this, we will consider different errors, all the errors that we are raising on the BMO as error. So since people outside will use that, probably, just to be aware if they want the problem to be a warning or not. In case you can, for example, you have a timeout when you try to access the Redfish BMC to get the information. So the validation would fail if this would be expected or not.
So I had a question which is
Sure.
related to the abstractions we have. So at the moment, the Ironic provisioner relies on Ironic itself to be the abstraction layer for the BMCs. And obviously it doesn't only work with Redfish, it also works with IPMI and potentially any other drivers that Ironic
Correct.
supports. I'm wondering why we need to do this validation in the BMO rather than relying on Ironic to do that validation for us, because that's normally the layer that does the BMC interaction. You know, why can't Ironic during the registration phase tell us that the BMC is not contactable or it's the wrong version?
So basically, I had a talk with Doug Hammond about it. Basically, the main idea to have this in the BMO initially is that the fact that we don't want to wait for Ironic to be able to validate. This would take too long, basically. But we have also the idea to implement in Ironic a way to validate the virtual media support. But if we have access to the BMC, we want to fail previously instead of just trying to deploy and then, okay, you have a node error. It was because it didn't really support virtual media, and you were trying virtual media on it.
I've just realized that your comment about taking too long, and I'm deeply sorry for not realizing it weeks ago.
No worries.
Applies to OpenShift installer. The OpenShift installer, for those who don't know, starts a bootstrap VM where it starts Ironic, where it enrolls the nodes, and only then you learn that your credentials were incorrect. So it's going to take 30 minutes just to learn that you made a typo in your password, which is a terrible experience. But I guess Steve's point is that BMO actually doesn't work this way, and it's going to be pretty fast. So maybe we should, and I'm sorry again, take your patch and move it to OpenShift installer proper.
So what I'm thinking is like performance may be a constraint if you want to do like webhook validation, but it doesn't sound like that's the plan here. In the bare metal operator, we have this registering state, and that's the point where we connect to Ironic, and we'll give it the details of the physical host. And at that point, Ironic should be able to tell us something about why it is not going to work, and that could be that it's not accessible, or the feature's not available, or the firmware version is bad, or something like that. And I mean, I'm just wondering whether making that knowledge in the bare metal operator is going to be a long-term sustainable plan, particularly when most of the logic around this kind of BMC interaction already exists, or the place which we put that logic is ironic at the moment. But yeah, as Dimitri says, that there's maybe reasons to do this differently in the OpenShift installer case, but that doesn't use the bare metal operator. It's a different code path.
Does the ironic registration phase actually error out if you know that it doesn't know that you want to use virtual media at that point, or do you have to wait till you get to a deployment to know?
Not yet. We validate the credentials. We validate that the system exists very early. What the exact version of what Yuri is doing does not exist, but we have plans to add that anyway. So regardless of how this work turns up.
I mean, in general, I totally get the benefit of adding more validations. I just want to make sure we're adding it to the right place.
Yeah, I think I see a point in doing that first in Ironic, then in OpenShift installer, maybe a lighter version.
Okay.
I know it sounds bad so close to a patch merging, but on the bright side, it's mostly the same patch applying to OpenShift installer, more or less.
Not 100% sure, but
I'm not necessarily blocking on this. I just wanted to ask the question because I haven't followed all of the discussion on the PR, but I did look at it the other day, and I just wondered why we were kind of shortcutting past Ironic when normally that's the thing that talks to BMCs in the current architecture.
I agree, that has been bothering me. What I did not realize, and what I'm now sorry for, is the argument about it's taking 30 minutes from the start to actually failing only applies to OpenShift installer, not to BMO upstream, or BMO is used in our normal deployment.
Yeah, I think providing we can just fail at the registering state in the state machine, it's really a question of making sure we get enough information about the failure back from Ironic, and then be able to reflect a clear error to the user as to why registering the node failed. And I think in the BMO that should happen pretty fast. The thing I'm not sure about is whether we get enough useful information back from Ironic at that stage to tell the user exactly what the problem is. So maybe that will need a bit more investigation.
We have a way. We populate a field called last error with information about this. And a transition from an raw to manageable is where these validations normally take place. And that's, for example, where we validate that we have power management control. So that is already happening.
Any other comments or questions?
I guess my only comment and concern is if you're going to rely on Ironic for all these actions and then you're going to bypass it, why wouldn't that requirement get pushed up to Ironic to give you a quicker way to do the registration or check for connection to the nodes? Why shouldn't that requirement get pushed up? I know it would take them a while to get to it, but wouldn't that be better in the long run, is to have them give you a quick check for node connectivity?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm thinking as well. Is
right.
Maybe Ironic's missing a feature to sort of fail
Correct.
fast in this situation.
So I would write an issue against Ironic and ask them to consider that as a feature that they need to provide.
On behalf of Ironic, I agree. We pretty much have this feature, we just don't have enough checks on this. So we already validate power credentials the way you describe. We don't validate virtual media availability.
Yeah.
sounds like we can follow up on the PR and maybe add some comments and then decide whether this one should carry on and link it to any ironic enhancement proposals that get raised.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Right. If not, then let's move on. Here, I hope you got at least some answers to your question. So the next one, I guess, now is from Steve.
Yeah, so this is just a request for reviews. I've had some good input on this. The implementation, I think, is pretty close now. I just need to finish the tests, which I'm doing today. The main tricky point here was the naming. So just as a reminder, I mentioned this on a previous call, the idea is to add a new annotation that is similar to the paused annotation, and it's for the same multi-tier kind of use case where you have a parent cluster that deploys a child cluster. The difference is in this case, we want to leave the parent cluster running, so it's not an ephemeral kind of pivot, and we want the inventory of resources, the bare metal host, to still exist on the parent cluster, so that you can potentially have reprovisioning options for disaster recovery and that kind of stuff. So this now does what we need. The tricky part, as always, has been bike shedding the name. So it started off being called unmanaged, but then we realized that overlapped with the existing unmanaged state in the state machine, so that could be confusing, having an operational status that was named the same. Then I changed it to deregistered, and there were concerns about that more reflecting the internal state. So the way this works is we'll just deregister or remove the host from Ironic, but still keep the resource in the BMO. So the name we've moved to now, the third rename is detached. I mean, it's one of those situations where there's probably no perfect name, but I wanted to try and achieve consensus so this doesn't just get blocked on the naming. And so it's a request for people to take a look, and if you have strong opinions about the name, please add a comment to the PR and we'll try and achieve consensus so we can move forwards with this.
Thank you. I think the proposal is also still open, right? I believe you were going back and forth and updating the proposal as well based on this.
Yeah, so I decided to wait until we've finished the many iterations of renaming this before updating the proposal again. But yeah, I think the proposal content is still valid other than the name. And when we reach agreement on this PR, I'll update the proposal to match.
Sure, thanks. Any questions or comments? No, if not, then please I would also ask the same. Whenever you have time, take a look at the PR. So I think that was the end of the agenda. If there is someone still wants to discuss something, but then please go ahead because we still have some time. Okay, if not, then I think we can close the call here. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.